What defines evil anyways? Just because you've been labeled as a villain doesn't mean you can't sometimes play the good guy too. You might be shocked to see the Joker on this list, but in the Joker 80th Anniversary 100-page super spectacular, the Joker actually manages to do something a little sweet for a change. But don't worry, it's only a little sweet. He is on his way to take care of a henchman who failed him by not showing up when he was supposed to, and the Joker actually thinks that this guy may have sold out his plans to the Batman. Not good. However, while on his way to seek revenge, he runs into what he deems as the weird yet wise son of this goon named Sergio. Sergio charms the Joker with his little torture bug box, and Joker discovers that today is Sergio's birthday party when Sergio mistakes him for a hired party clown, but informs him that he doesn't have to actually do anything because no one has come to his birthday party, not even his dad. Oh, that's really sad. Joker thinks that this just isn't right and terrifies the neighborhood families into attending and promises before leaving to come to Sergio's birthday party every year. Aw, it's kinda sweet. Sure, it was still pretty terrible the way that Joker went about helping, but in the end, I think he sees some of his tormented self in Sergio, and it's kinda cute that this inspires him to try and help the young boy, even if it is in his own, well, twisted Joker-like way. Number 9. MCU's Ghost. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Ghost is not as mysterious of a figure as their comic book counterpart. When it is revealed partway through the film she first appears in, Ant-Man and the Wasp, to be Ava Starr, the daughter of Hank Pym's former associate. Ava was turned intangible following one of her father's experiments gone wrong, which resulted in an explosion that also claimed the lives of both of her parents. Pym's other former partner, Bill Foster, aka Goliath, took her in and proceeded to try and help cure her of her painful intangibility. This prompted Ava to become the villain known as Ghost, attempting to take revenge on the Pyms who she blames for the death of her parents and her own condition. In the end, however, Janet Van Dyne works to help cure Ava, helping her to realize the error of her ways and to soothe her vengeful spirit, turning Ghost into a more neutral or heroic role, who instead aims to work alongside Hank Pym, Janet Van Dyne, Ant-Man, and the Wasp. Number 8. Carnage. During the events of Axis, Cletus Cassidy had his alignment inverted, turning him into your friendly neighborhood Carnage, a character who now desperately wanted to be good, but basically had no idea how to go about it. After all, Cletus was still a deranged serial killer and as such felt all the impulses of his old self, and had to fight to ignore them. Despite desperately wanting to be good, he was pretty awful at it. Imagine a more insane version of Deadpool basically. Carnage in fact was even more lost than Deadpool when it came to differentiating from right and wrong. However, he still managed to save the humans of planet Earth from all being murdered when he sacrificed himself to prevent the inverted X-Men celestial gene bomb from exploding and killing everyone who wasn't a mutant. And he did this by wrapping himself around the bomb after Spider-Man was unable to defuse it in time. It was actually kinda sweet. Of course, Carnage didn't end up dying and would later return to us alive and as evil as ever. So don't worry, he wasn't good for very long. Number 7. Sabretooth. I know what you're likely thinking here, Sabretooth, but he's meant to be kind of the worst of the worst. He's feral and bloodthirsty and often kills without any remorse. How could he be a good guy? Well, I would argue that a lot of what makes Sabretooth evil actually has to do with the way that he was raised. He himself could be a hero in another life. In fact, in the Age of Apocalypse universe, he kinda is. AOA Sabretooth ends up working alongside the displaced heroic alternates team known as the Exiles, and Sabretooth was one of the few to stay reversed after the events of Axis, which caused him to continue to push forward with his want to be a hero, following in Wolverine's footsteps. He even became the leader of his own mutant team for a while, Weapon X-Force, and had found love with fellow teammate Monet. Number 6. Dr. Octopus. He might not be a great hero, but even Dr. Otto Octavius has tried his hand at heroics. And Spider-Man actually was responsible for this transformation. Doc Ock's body was failing him and he was about to die, so he came up with the ultimate villainous plot, to steal Spider-Man's body. What he wasn't expecting, however, was to have the consciousness of Peter sway him to change sides as Parker lay dying in Otto's failing body. Spider-Man manages to convince Doc Ock that the world needs Spider-Man, causing Doc Ock to promise that he'll try to be an even better Spider-Man than Peter was. He doesn't end up doing so great though, and in the end he even relinquishes the body of Peter Parker back to Peter's consciousness, who kinda remained within the body in the backseat even after we thought all of Peter's mind had died within Otto's body. it's a little confusing. Number 5. Dr. Freeze. Freeze being a hero all depends on your perspective really, as so many stories do when it comes to the roles that characters play. And it also kind of depends on which story we're telling. There is a story where Freeze is a man obsessed with a woman who he romanticizes, imagining she will awake from her frozen slumber and fall in love with him, like some sort of twisted Sleeping Beauty plot. However, the story we'd like to focus on, where he is the hero, is the one where he is only turning to a life of crime to help fund a project. However, the story we'd like to focus on, Freeze actually froze his wife Nora in order to cure her from her illness, so his whole freezing thing is all about just taking care of his wife. Number 4. Catwoman. Granted, not everyone thinks of Selina as a supervillain, but that just proves how good she is at, well, being good. When Catwoman was first introduced in the comics, it was as a cat burglar who at that time just went by the name of Cat, and was fond of stealing the money and jewels of the wealthy. Of course, later on, as Selina's story progressed, she would become an even bigger love interest for Batman and Bruce, and would often work with him as his ally, for a time almost permanently seeming to switch sides and becoming more of a hero than anything else. She would later learn, however, that some of her good deeds were not really of her own volition, as Zatanna had actually manipulated her mind, making Catwoman debate whether or not she was ever really good at heart to begin with. I think, however, that Selina has always had that good side to her though, whether or not she is always aware of it. Number 3. Ozymandias. Adrian Veidt actually was a hero for a good amount of the Watchmen story, until of course we found out that he's really the mastermind supervillain behind all the schemes and the murder. However, everything dastardly that he does is all for the betterment of mankind on a greater scale. What he's trying to sow with his chaos and crimes is a sense of unity, to make everyone see the importance of peace once more, and to believe in superheroes again. So yeah, I guess there is a bit of an ego included in his plot with, he kinda wants to be the hero, but still, overall, if we were to give Ozymandias any sort of alignment, it would probably be lawful good. Good being the important word there. Sure, his plan didn't exactly turn out the way he'd hoped, and in the end he finds his whole villainous machinations exposed by Rorschach's journals, but hey, he tried. Number 2. Dr. Doom. Remember when Doom was actually the hero of the story? Probably one of his best stories to date was the series featuring Dr. Doom as the infamous Iron Man. During this amazing miniseries, we finally get to see Doom act like the hero he sometimes is in the comics. While he still maintains his ego just like Doom as a villain, there are many times in the series that he proves that he's kind of earning the right to his ego. Like when a team of his old villainous rivals and sometimes allies gather to discuss the problem of Doom as Iron Man. As a hero, he'd be unstoppable, they surmise, but their theory is if they band together, he won't be able to defeat all of them. Their meeting, however, is interrupted by the infamous Iron Man himself busting in and proving them to be very wrong, as he effortlessly defeats all of them at once. Number 1. Poison Ivy. As far as good intentions go, Dr. Pamela Isley likely has some of the best. Before she was granted her plant-controlling powers, she was labeled a villain just for being an aggressive environmentalist. For her ruthless attitude toward protecting plant life, she was considered a supervillain and an eco-terrorist. But really, Poison Ivy just wants to take care of the planet and its plant life. And when she used her powers to control all of Gotham, things actually proved to be going pretty well under her rule. Although at the cost of free will, of course, so there is that.
In at number 10, Planetary/Batman, Night on Earth. In this crossover between Planetary and Batman, the Planetary team travels to Gotham in a one-shot that takes place outside of both of their continuities, and the team ends up meeting different Batmen from different universes in the process. During the story, we meet an agent for Planetary named Jasper, who works under Richard Grayson. He's not exactly evil, just kinda weird, and gets really giggly when he's nervous and hugs himself when he sees pictures of homicides. So technically good, but strange. And at number 9 is Martha Wayne's Joker. From the Flashpoint universe, we have Martha Wayne, Bruce's mother, as the Joker. Initially evil after witnessing her son being shot down instead of her and her husband, Thomas, Martha goes insane. Thomas, on the flip side, becomes Batman. Eventually the two end up working together and Martha turns a more positive cheek. But once they realize that the results of their actions will result in timelines being changed and their son becoming Batman instead, well, she kills herself. And at number 8 is The Brave and the Bold 191. In an instance in which Batman and the Joker work together, this version of the Joker from the 1982 Brave and the Bold run features the Joker we all know and love working for his nemesis to clear his name of murder. Sounds a little silly, but Hey, when has the Joker ever not denied one of his crimes? In the story, the Penguin is killed on live TV by someone who looks like the Joker. The Joker later summons Batman to tell him he's not responsible, and that it was actually a phony Joker. They then work together to solve the mystery. Shenanigans ensue, and Batman learns that the Joker actually cared a lot for the Penguin. Turns out the Penguin framed the Joker and is still alive, so the two trick him and capture him. And the Joker is super jazzed about it all, which is kind of adorable. In at number 7, Batman the Brave and the Bold, the cartoon. Speaking of the Brave and the Bold, let's take a look at the cartoon this time, and when the Joker in it has been on the side of good. In the episode Game Over for Owlman, the Joker teams up with Batman, when Owlman has taken over his identity. The Owlman who appears in this show is also from an alternate Earth in which he's a villain. In this episode, Owlman takes over Batman's persona, and the Joker isn't really down with that. Doesn't like being one-upped. Up next at number 6 is Oberon Sexton. Oberon Sexton was once a British novelist who wrote books on true crime, who had gotten a little too invested in true crime really. He ended up killing his wife, made the crime scene look like a gang did it, and then was murdered himself by the Joker, who then took his identity and started helping Dick Grayson, aka the Batman, in Batman and Robin Volume 1 back in 2010. As Sexton, he aided Grayson in hunting down the Domino Killer, and reveals himself in Batman and Robin number 13, claiming because of the death of Bruce Wayne, his Batman as he states, he can no longer be the clown prince he once was. But psych, he's also the Domino Killer. So he was sort of good, but then not really good, but still kind of evil, but was nice for a bit, and it may have been a multiple personality disorder byproduct. Moving on. And at number 5, Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, Volume 1, Issue number 145. How's that for a title? In part 4 of a story arc called The Demon Laughs, Joker, who is dying, is submerged in a Lazarus pit by Batman. He's got to stop Ra's al Ghul's latest scheme, and the only way to do so is by saving the Joker, who is dying. Typically, when someone emerges from the Lazarus pit, they go through a brief stage of insanity, but the reverse happens to Joker, with him emerging sane. He then ends up helping Batman by informing him of where he planted a transmitter in Raz's submarine, and then helps Bats destroy it, along with the dangerous biological agent inside of it. Of course, Joker reverts back to his normal insane state by the end of the story. Up next, number 4 is Batman Europa. Batman Europa was a long time coming. It was announced in 2004 and was eventually released in 2014. Both Batman and the Joker are infected with a deadly virus called the Colossus virus, and have a week to live. Bruce goes to Berlin, and turns out the Joker is there too. The two start working together to figure out who's trying to kill them, partnering up on a continent-wide road trip. How cute. And if that isn't cute enough for you, the first page definitely fuels the fire for shippers of Batman and Joker. And at number 3, Batman White Knight. After the Joker pushes Batman too far, Bruce goes a little insane himself, and force feeds a bottle of pills to the Joker. This ends up instilling an unexpected reaction from the Joker as a result of the overdose. The Joker gets his sanity back, and begins a crusade to get the GCPD to charge Batman for assault, or he'll sue them for the complicity in Batman's abuse of prisoners. Ooh. He even reforms Harley Quinn in the process, and proposes. Up next, number 2 is Joker of Earth 9. In this story that appears under the Tangent Comics imprint, the Joker is a female superhero who is actually an alias used by 3 separate women: Mary Marvel, a student, Christy Xanadu, an entrepreneur, and Lori Lamaris, a reporter. Unfortunately, they don't have too great of a fate. The Superman of that Earth, known as Harvey Dent, is a tyrant and rules over the planet. So of course he tortures Mary into revealing the identities of the other 2 women before murdering her. Lori went to prison and Christie's fate is unknown. But eventually Lori takes up the mantle of one of her other fallen comrades, Manhunter. And finally at number 1, Jokester of Earth 3. And probably the most noble of Joker's appearances as a good guy, Jokester of Earth 3 is a man named Jackie, who was a struggling comedian at the Last Laugh Comedy Club. He witnesses the club's owner being murdered by Owlman, the evil alternate version of Batman, and this inspired him to redesign his comedy act, making Owlman the butt of all of his jokes, which then makes him a bit of a hero among citizens of Gotham, who are all oppressed by the crime syndicate and Owlman. But also puts a giant target on his back. Owlman then murders his friends and cuts Jackie's mouth open into a smile. Jackie goes insane, becomes the Jokester, and dedicates his life to ruining Owlman and humiliating him. And at number 10, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul is an international criminal mastermind, the leader of the League of Assassins, whose aim is to achieve perfect environmental balance for the world, a goal that he thinks he can achieve by eliminating most of humanity, much to Batman's disdain. His MOs usually involve biological weapons or genetically engineered viruses. Aside from his intellectual brilliance, Ra's is a character who can be boasted for his relentlessness, not only through his willpower and resilience, but also through his ability to keep on coming back due to the Lazarus pits, which have the ability to restore the dead. Ra's attempts to achieve environmental balance go beyond the comics too. Played by Liam Neeson in Batman Begins, he gave the Cape Crusader one hell of a run for his money, and even though he was defeated, his daughter made sure to step up 2 films later and also mess with Bruce Wayne. Up next, number 9, Magneto. Magneto's main ambition has always been to have mutants be the superior race. This stems from a need to protect mutants from suffering suffering a horrible fate at the hands of humans, who often persecute them. This is an entirely rational ambition, minus the whole killing humanity thing. He really does have a point. Magneto was a Holocaust survivor, and his cynical philosophy of achieving peace for mutants derives directly from his past experiences. It also doesn't help that humans have been less than kind to mutants over the years. Magneto feels that achieving the survival of mutants should come at the expense of humanity at large. Otherwise, it's mutants who face extinction, and he just so happens to be the one to usher in that survival. Up next, number 8, Poison Ivy. Created back in 1966, Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy, has been Batman's most enduring and cunning female villain to date. Sorry, Catwoman doesn't really count as a villain, let's be honest. Ivy is one of the DC Universe's most notorious eco-terrorists, but she doesn't act out of a desire of creating chaos for chaos's sake. Instead, all of her actions and criminal activities are motivated out of a desire to protect the environment and endangered species, to the point where she regards plant life higher than human life. This irreverence towards human life has made her more of a complex character at times, but also a little full of herself, like many other villains on our list. These days though, Poison Ivy is more of an anti-hero, often teaming up with gal pal Harley Quinn instead of plotting acts of mass eco-terrorism, which is probably for the best. Up next, number 7, Caleb from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm sure we can all agree that Nathan Fillion is pretty darn great, and while Joss Whedon didn't get his full run with the actor in Firefly like we all would have wanted, Whedon did get to pop him into one of his other hit shows, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as Caleb, the creepiest priest who ever did priest, or kill, rather. Caleb is a psychotic serial killer. Once a man of God, now a loyal disciple of the First Evil, who is Buffy's most difficult foe, Caleb is very much aware that he's not the head honcho of Operation Let Evil Consume the Earth, but he sure as hell takes great pleasure in being the vessel for the First, and treats the First as a superior force to God, who he must serve, and murder a bunch of potential slayers while doing so. R.I.P. Xander's eye. Up next at 6, Helmut Zemo. While Zemo's motivations and actions may be a little bit more skewed in the comics, he's basically a white supremacist, the Zemo that we were given in the MCU actually chases a more noble cause in Captain America Civil War. The character concocts a plan in which he tricks the members of the Avengers to fight amongst themselves, compromising them from the inside out, instead of just blatantly attacking them. It almost works too. Under the ever-present divider that is the Sokovia Accords, Zemo makes it appear that Bucky Barnes has killed T'Chaka, the king of Wakanda, causing conflict between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, who were already at opposing ends concerning the Accords. This only gets worse when Tony finds out that Bucky was responsible for killing his parents. Zemo's act against the Avengers is out of revenge for what happened during Age of Ultron in Sokovia, the destruction that killed his family amongst countless others. Up next at number 5, Dr. Doom. A complete megalomaniac, Victor Von Doom has always had his heart bent on world domination, but his reasoning is actually pretty solid. Doom believes that under his control, mankind will only benefit, and be the best that it can be. No world hunger, peace everywhere, seems pretty promising. And funny enough, he's actually right, which we've seen on multiple occasions. In Emperor Doom, the graphic novel, Doom gets bored with the world domination that he's achieved, so he just gives it up when Wonder Man challenges him. Another point in history saw him looking into the future, with the one future ruled by Doom being the only one with total peace. And he even proves that he's capable of instigating peace on a not so terrible level, to an extent, in his home of Latveria, where he ruled. He's actually pretty good at ruling, and he clearly knows that he's the one qualified for the job, but just like, maybe don't be so evil about it, Doom. Up next, number 4, Norman Osborn. During the Dark Reign story arc, Osborn saw himself as a savior, which becomes very much apparent during his big monologue at the end of Siege. Osborn was granted some serious power at the end of Secret Invasion, which followed the Skrull invasion of Earth, when he became the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. His reign of terror was prompted by a desire to make the world a safer place, all by not letting anyone just become a superhero. Using the Superhuman Registration Act, he was able to enforce this without having any massive backlash, but was also still pretty evil. Up next at 3, Negan. Negan has always been a mega asshole. Fans of the Walking Dead comics who were introduced to him long before his debut in the Walking Dead television series knew that he was capable of some pretty gruesome stuff, although both TV show and comic managed to depict Glenn's death in a pretty horrific, gruesome manner. Negan was the leader of a group called the Saviors. Yeah, pretty fitting of this list. And the group followed a strict set of rules, making it almost cult-like. Negan himself is a jolly, savage individual who adores mayhem, violence, and manipulation. Despite his fondness for these things, the character firmly believes that the strong are meant to protect the defenseless, and that if they were to give in to harming those who were defenseless, they would be unable to rebuild civilization. Although he is a little hypocritical. Up next, number 2, Thanos. Heads up, MCU spoilers at this number. Although we already kinda spoiled Civil War, but you should have seen that by now. Of course, Thanos has to be on this list. His whole shtick is that by using the Infinity Gauntlet and all of the stones, he will be able to balance the universe, which apparently is done by killing off half of all living beings within it, something that he admits wholeheartedly to Gamora when discussing his intentions with her in the Avengers Infinity War film. It's not just the MCU Thanos that thinks he's saving the universe though. The one in the comics is also convinced that he's doing the right thing, except his motivation is arguably worse. He's doing it in order to get Death, the entity that is, to find him worthy and return his love. The MCU version, at least from what we currently know about Thanos, has not been connected to Mistress Death yet, and fits more so into the villain with a facade of a savior category, especially considering how much he grieved when sacrificing everything he's ever loved in order to get the job done. That being said, in the comics he does conquer a lot for the sake of conquering, although isn't overly great about it. And finally, in at number 1, Ozymandias. The only reason Adrian Veidt tops the Mad Titan on our list is because of how close to home his master plan hits, which is quite literally hitting home in the comics and the Watchmen cinematic adaptation. Dude kills 3 million people in order to achieve world peace. So, for context, Watchmen takes place in an alternate timeline where superheroes emerged in the 1940s, and their presence altered history, leading to the US winning the Vietnam War and having the Watergate scandal never exposed. This timeline has led to a more potent Cold War, in which nuclear war between the US and Russia is inevitable, with only the fiercely powerful Dr. Manhattan in the way of international genocide. Throughout Watchmen, Veidt's motives are uncovered by Rorschach and Night Owl, after the comedian's death has left the former on a hunt to unravel a conspiracy which he initially believes is an attempt to kill off the remaining costume heroes. By the time they catch up with Adrian, he's already executed his plan, to divert the nuclear threat by giving humans a singular cause to rally against, in the comics a fake alien invasion, and in the film adaptation, against Dr. Manhattan himself, although both plans in the comics and the films involve distracting Manhattan flawlessly. After Adrian carries out his plan, he turns our hero's attention to the news broadcast airing across the globe, all of which prove that he has indeed prompted global peace, which causes everyone but Rorschach to agree that concealing the truth is the best way to maintain that peace.
Number 10. Mr. Freeze. Victor Freeze only became the criminal Dr. Freeze after an experiment went wrong, causing his body temperatures to be lowered, meaning that he always needed to be kept at a colder temperature. As a young man, he was also fascinated by cryogenics, and some stories even getting sent off to boarding school because he froze a cat as a kid to study it. After finding love, his wife Nora is diagnosed with an incurable terminal illness. In an attempt to save her, he aims to cryogenically freeze her until a cure can be found for her illness. There are a few different versions of the way this ends up going for Freeze. He either works to avenge her after she dies in a lab accident, or works to raise money to cure her with his life of crime and his freeze ray. Granted, there is also a storyline where Nora is just a subject that Mr. Freeze becomes creepily obsessed with, but we're not going to focus on that one for the purpose of this list. Just think of Mr. Freeze as someone who does bad things because of true love. He doesn't necessarily want to do them, but he has to. Number 9. Lizard. I actually feel really bad for Lizard. Kurt Connors never intended to become a villain. He was simply working to create a cure for lost limbs by creating a formula that would help them to regenerate or grow back. Unfortunately, the serum he created transformed him into a monster. Many storylines actually paint Connors as a victim more than a villain, a brilliant mind trapped behind the animalistic instincts of a giant lizard. Connors consistently works hard to control his transformations and gain control over his mind while in the lizard form, while continuing to work towards the cure he originally sought while in his human form. Connors' intentions always remain heroic, even when the lizards are very much not heroic. You can't help but feel bad for this man and villain's struggle. At one point, his lizard form and mentality even caused him to eat his own son. Tragic. Number 8. Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock may not always have the best intentions at heart, but as another brilliant mind on the list, he is aimed to do the best he can for others at times. Though I will admit that he also often has something to gain from his heroic actions. Take for example his time as Superior Spider-Man. His goals as Spider-Man were noble, but he also took up the mantle so he could escape his failing body, transferring Peter Parker's consciousness into his dying body and leaving him there until it just fully shut down. Granted, he also relinquished Peter's body to a shadow of Peter's former self, which was actually still in his own body, after having some success in his role as Spider-Man, ultimately deciding that Peter was the hero that was truly needed after being defeated by the Green Goblin. Still, his intentions were obviously to be a hero in Parker's stead, and aimed to be an even better one at that, but Doc Ock just couldn't cut it. Number 7. Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor's hatred of Superman may often taint his noble efforts, but there are many times when Luthor has made sacrifices for the greater good. He has teamed up with Superman on multiple occasions to help fight against various enemies, including Doomsday. He even joined the Justice League in the animated series momentarily and helped them defeat the Justice Lords, an alternate version of the Justice League who rule with an iron fist on the world they have come from, where they also killed their version of Lex Luthor. The Justice Lords have come to invade Earth so that they can transform it to mirror their own reality. When the Justice League go to stop them, they appear to be evenly matched against the Justice Lords, and Superman turns to Lex to help him. Lex agrees to do so. He uses an energy disruptor device to take away the Lord's powers and defeat them, and doesn't even turn the device on the League. Say what you want about his hatred of Superman, but Lex often knows when to put the benefits of innocence above his petty feuds. Say what you want about his hatred of Superman, but Lex often knows when to put the benefits of innocence above his own petty feuds. And he's a man of his word, because he promised he wouldn't betray the Justice League. And so he didn't. Number 6. Magneto. Sure, Magneto is sort of a anti-normal humans activist and founder of the Brotherhood of Mutants, but everything he does for the greater good of mutant kind. In fact, he and the heroic Professor X are out to do pretty much the same thing. It's just the way Magneto goes about fighting for mutant rights that makes him a villain. He feels that the only way to get humans to respect mutants' rights is through oppression and fear. In the new X-Men relaunch, House of X, he even works with Xavier to grant mutants freedom through establishing their own nation, their own world. Krakoa. And you should see what is part of their plan together in House of X issue 5. I don't want to spoil it though, so I'll leave it for you to just read. But I will say that when Professor X and Magneto decide to work together, it already makes me see Magneto's intentions as being more noble, more good. If Charles is willing to work with him, then he can't be all bad, right? Number 5. Killmonger. The comics paint another story for Njindaka known as Eric Killmonger, who was resentful and felt unwanted. After returning to Wakanda, he appears grateful to T'Challa, but also expresses fear at opening the borders of Wakanda as his king has done. He later seeks to overthrow King T'Challa and rule the world. This last part is similar to Eric's intentions in the MCU though. The cinematic universe paints a nobler version of Eric as a child whose father, T'Challa's uncle, was killed by the former king, T'Challa's father, T'Chaka. Seeking to get vengeance, he returns to Wakanda, who keeps his wealth and resources as a secret from the world. Eric's goal is to take over Wakanda and rule so that he can wage war on the earth in an effort to remove the oppression imposed on African descendants around the world. I mean, war is never a great thing to do, but his goal isn't a bad one. He wants to help other people, feeling that Wakanda is wrong not to have done so in the first place, and was wrong to have abandoned him. In fact, his intentions are considered so great that T'Challa actually learns from this fight over the throne and from his cousin. In the end, he decides it would be best to try and reach out, open the borders of Wakanda, and make an effort to help the rest of the world with their resources. Which is also what his girlfriend Nakia was urging him to do in the film, who was actually nothing really like her comic book version. Number 4. Poison Ivy. My favorite eco-terrorist. I've always seen Poison Ivy as having the best intentions at heart. What she wants more than anything is to protect her plants. Unfortunately, the way she sees things, humans and plants just don't get along. And she's not really wrong about that, especially in the modern age. Humans are actually one of the worst things for nature. We cut it down, we choke it with fumes, we tear it up and build condos in a parking lot in a mall. To Poison Ivy, our very existence threatens that of her and her babies, her little plants. Like any good mother, she just wants to protect them. Sure, if Poison Ivy has it her way, we won't be around to enjoy the planet, but it will also be kind of happier without us. I mean, at least in her mind. Number 3. Thanos. We are not talking about comic book Thanos here, but instead are turning to look at the MCU Thanos, who does appear to have good intentions at heart. If he has a heart. I don't know. Comic book Thanos wreaks havoc and kills in an attempt to woo Mistress Death, who is Death incarnate but whom Thanos is infatuated with. Or he was. He recently turned her down after she finally decided the pair could be together. Weird. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thanos declares he kills to restore balance to the world. He even has that cute and sadistic scene with little Gamora where he explains all this. Remember the one? The one with the blade where they're balancing it? You know what I'm talking about. Ultimately, his home world Titan became overpopulated, and Thanos saw this as the beginning of the end for his people. The planet is now desolate as the civilization seems to have long ago collapsed. In an effort to protect other planets from suffering from the same tragedy, he eliminates half of the population of every planet he comes across. Wanting to make this easier on himself, because, you know, killing that many people is a lot of work, he works to assemble the Infinity Gauntlet, allowing for easier genocidal destruction with a mere snap of his fingers. As much as the heroes protest that this is not the way to go about this, and I do agree, this does seem like a simple solution to kind of a huge problem. Even real-world Earth suffers from overpopulation, after all. Number 2. Ozymandias. A victim of his own ego, Ozymandias worked hard to create a plot that he believed would result in world peace. His plan was brilliant and elaborate, making it look like there was a greater alien threat incoming to band the world together and create peace. The part that makes him villainous is that he kinda put himself at the center of the plan, making it all revolve around him. Seeing himself in his plot is the only / best way to save the planet. Adrian Veidt sees superheroes as a huge problem with the world and works to eliminate Dr. Manhattan, who he thinks perfectly perfectly symbolizes everything that is potentially wrong with heroes. He also eliminates anyone that gets in his way, killing the comedian and later framing Rorschach in a murder case. His plan even works, killing millions, but to save billions and end the war. I mean, it works at least for a while. Number 1. Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom is a genius and insane magic user who rules over Latveria. Beyond that, he has also ruled the Earth before, and even saved it a few times. As a villain, he doesn't seem to be interested in destroying anyone except his foes, the Fantastic Four, and even then, he confines that desire to usually just trying to destroy Reed Richards. He even helps Sue Storm give birth. In truth, his ego is what makes him villainous, and sometimes unsuccessful in his plots. He wants to be adored and just feel that he is better than other people, but often he doesn't show great interest in harming other people. In fact, he wants to prove that he is better, often by being a great leader. As much as he despises the Fantastic Four, he even led their team at a time. And the crazy thing about Dr. Doom is he actually is a great leader. When he managed to rule the world for a while, it was peaceful, food was plentiful, and the economy was booming. So while he might not always be the nicest guy in terms of sacrificing individuals' personal freedoms, he sure knows how to make the world a pretty great place for everyone to live in. You just have to be willing to admit that he is the best, bow down to him, and possibly give in to some slight mind control. NBD.
In the number 10 spot is Dr. Doom. This villain did not come into the world a blessed man. His sorceress mother died of illness, his father was sentenced to death and forced to flee, leading to his death as well. The reason he became who he is because of an experiment gone terribly wrong when he was just trying to communicate with his deceased mom. Though he's full of anger and pain, yet he still tries to be a good guy sometimes, like when he teamed up with Doctor Strange in the graphic novel Triumph and Torture, or when he's delivering babies on the side. Next at number 9 we have Kingpin. Marvel's Wilson Fisk may just come off as your typical Tony Soprano mob boss, but there's so much more behind him than just a guy who wants to own the city. Despite a heart of evil, there's a large piece of it that's deeply devoted to his wife, and he would do anything for her, be it quit crime for a bit, or kidnap a therapist's wife to convince him to help her after her supposed death and come back. Wouldn't a nice check be enough maybe? Therapist's feelings aside, isn't that a gesture of love? In the number 8 spot is Prometheus. Not the guy who stole fire and gave it to humans, although that was totally nice of him to do. Nobody likes a raw chicken leg. Prometheus from DC was the son of 2 hippie criminals who got caught and gunned down by law enforcement. From then on, he created the image in his mind that justice and the law were evil, and he swore he would do whatever he could with his skills and the inordinate amount of money left to him to stop police force from oppressing the innocent. Innocent in his eyes, of course. Up in number 7, we got Bane. He broke the Bat's back, and we can guarantee he's broken a lot more than just that. But what Bane doesn't break is his loyalty, strangely enough. The DC villain who is notorious for being merciless, but also seems a lot more human than most, was raised behind bars and only knew a life of everyone for themselves. However, he did a total 180 in Batman Bane of the Demon and started a career as a hero, all because he thought Batman was his stepbrother. Turns out later they were never related and he returns to villainy, but just goes to show you that family matters to him. Coming in at number 6 is Lizard. As always, an experiment gone wrong led to the creation of this Marvel villain. All he wanted was his arm back. Now he's stuck looking like this. You gotta feel bad for him. As a lizard, he hates humanity, but as a human, he still has a good heart and wants to do good. He's helped Spider-Man on numerous occasions, one prominent one being developing a cure for Aunt May's poisoning. Such a monstrous creature still has a heart, so you have no excuse to be an asshole. Next up in number 5, we have Black Adam. Most people know this guy as a huge jerk of the DC world, but there's reasons behind it. He was corrupted by his powerful abilities and decided they qualified him to rule the world. So he usurps the Egyptian throne, but is then banished. Sucks to be him, but that's what happens when you overstep your bounds. However, he met his wife Isis in the New 52 and she brought out the kind heart in him. He started a family, he became a benevolent and caring leader, then everything he loves is ripped away from him again and it's back to villainy. All he wanted was to protect and love his people. Up next in number 4 is Harley Quinn. She was an accessory to the Joker's villainy, but Harley herself was never acting out of the need to hurt people or take over the world or any of those cliches. She was driven by love and the need to help someone. Maybe obsessive love, but love nonetheless. Ever since releasing the Joker from Arkham Asylum, her motives have all been based in keeping their relationship strong, at least in her eyes. And to think she was even a psychologist in the first place to understand and help her fractured family. It all comes down to the unrequited emotions this girl has for crappy people. In the number 3 spot is Harry Osborn. Harry Osborn was one of Spider-Man's closest friends, and it's really quite tragic what happened between them. As the son of the Green Goblin that Spidey is kind of responsible for killing, Harry followed in his dad's footsteps, and it was basically all downhill from there. But friendship is is strong, and Harry occasionally shows sympathy for his rival, especially when he ends up sacrificing himself for Peter in the end. My tears have yet to dry, do not judge me. Coming in at number 2, we got Magneto. Magneto is a survivor of the Holocaust, where he lost so much and gained a new anger and hatred towards the human race. He lives in fear of what should happen should humans ever try to persecute mutants, and hence he is at odds against Charles Xavier and his petition for peaceful coexistence. The solution to Magneto? Wipe out the human race, which seems pretty evil to us, but he's only looking out for his species and wanting what's best for them. And I mean, I won't lie, humans can be pretty terrible. And finally, in the number 1 spot, we have Bizarro. This poor guy's life is so backwards that he believes he is the hero and he believes he is doing good. As the polar opposite to Superman, he smashes and crashes and doesn't understand what he's doing causes harm. He just wants to be loved and accepted and find a place to fit in with society. But his backward thinking and quite frankly his stupidity don't really seem to allow for that. It's kind of hard when everything you try to save dies.
Number 10. The Sandman. William Baker was raised in less than ideal circumstances, with a father who abandoned him as a baby and a mother who coped with this by drinking too much. He grew up to be a bully, calling himself Flint and picking on those weaker and smaller than him. After being expelled from high school for throwing a football game, Flint turned to crime to support himself. He was eventually arrested but broke out of prison and was exposed to radiation that gave him the power to turn his body into sand that he could reshape into whatever shape he liked. He used these powers to fight heroes such as Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four for years, but eventually expressed a desire to go straight. He developed a friendship with the Thing and even rescued his old nemesis Spider-Man from the evil enforcers. He would go on to join Silver Sable's Wild Pack and was eventually allowed to join the Avengers, showing that he really did have it in him to be a hero. Unfortunately, a villain known as the Wizard created a machine that undid all of Flint's hard work and returned him to his evil nature. Number 9. Gentleman Ghost. Jim Craddock was the son of an English gentleman who abandoned his family, forcing them into poverty. Jim turned to crime, becoming a highwayman before moving to America in hopes of making his fortune. He came across a fortune teller who told him that he would be murdered and become a ghost who would never be able to rest until he had killed the people responsible for his death. This prophecy proved true when the gunslingers Nighthawk and Cinnamon killed him for a crime he did not commit. He became the Gentleman Ghost and developed the powers of invisibility, teleportation, and intangibility, as well as the ability to control his victims' minds. He set about killing his murderers, but unfortunately for him, the gunslingers were reincarnated as Hawkman and Hawkgirl, making him unable to rest, as every time they die, they are reborn. Jim is understandably upset at being killed for no reason and not being able to move on to the afterlife, but if he could put this past him, he could make much better use of his time. Robbing museums and banks is fun, but will probably get old after a couple centuries. Instead, he could use these powers to stop most other supervillains with minimal effort with his mind control. He could do things that the other heroes could never dream of for the simple reason that he is already dead. He is unlikely to reform anytime soon, but it's an interesting possibility to contemplate. Number 8. The Vulture. Adrian Toomes was a simple electrical engineer and inventor who developed a harness that allowed the wearer to fly. He discovered that his business partner was embezzling money from their company, but was ousted by his partner who sold the company. Not wanting to be left with nothing, Toomes used his harness to create the Vulture suit and wings and stole his share of the money from his former partner. Unfortunately, he enjoyed the rush of this and then decided to keep robbing people, going on crime sprees and leaving taunting notes to the authorities. He soon came into conflict with Spider-Man, who defeated him, causing the Vulture to vow revenge. Vulture has been one of Spidey's most consistent foes, but the fact that his career in crime was started due to circumstance and thrill-seeking makes me wonder what would have happened if his business partner hadn't betrayed him. Toomes would probably have just been a wealthy and successful inventor, but if he really wanted a thrill, he could probably achieve that by fighting crime. The suit allows him to fly and heightens his strength. He basically has a very similar power set to Falcon, who does very well with what he's got. Adding to that his genius intellect, it isn't hard to imagine a world in the multiverse where Vulture works to make the world a better place. Number 7. Weather Wizard. Mark Marden was a small-time crook who escaped from prison and got lucky when he went to hide out at his brother's home. His brother was a scientist who was working on weather-controlling technology, and Mark used this tech to create his signature weapon, the Weather Wand. Weather Wizard uses this to unleash blizzards, tornadoes, and lightning storms upon his enemy, the Flash. In one of his first schemes, Weather Wizard tried to take over the country by building weather control stations and then holding various towns hostage unless his demands were met. that. Putting aside the fact that all of the abilities of the weather wand could be used to fight crime just as easily as it can be used to commit them, in a world where severe droughts threaten to destroy crops and hurricanes ravage coastal cities, the ability to change the weather could be used to save millions of lives. This is probably more in line with what Weather Wizard's brother had in mind when he created the initial tech, but Mark's inability to see the potential of the tech he's using is truly baffling. Number 6. Magneto. When Max Eisenhardt was a young man in Germany, he was subjected to many atrocities at the hands of the Third Reich, who sent him to Auschwitz for no other reason than being Jewish. He eventually escaped and became known as Erich Lenscher. He discovered that he had the ability to control the powers of magnetism, and after the war, used them to track down former German soldiers. He developed the belief that mutants and humanity could not coexist and became Magneto, a mutant dedicated to mutant superiority and the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He fought the X-Men several times over the years, but they eventually came to an uneasy truce, working together to form a refuge for their kind on the island of Krakoa. Considering that his intentions are relatively noble, and he has managed to do a lot of good despite his brutal nature, it is a real shame that the trauma of his younger years shaped him into someone with such a negative view of the world. As if he didn't have that baggage, who knows what he and Professor X could have achieved together for their people and humanity. Number 5. Two-Face. Harvey Dent was one of Batman's staunchest allies, working with him as Gotham's district attorney in their effort to root out the crime and corruption that had plagued the city. This all changed when Dent was talking to the crime boss Salvatore Maroni in court. Maroni had smuggled in a vial of highly corrosive acid and threw it in Harvey's face, disfiguring half of his face and turning the heroic district attorney into the villain Two-Face. Two-Face is obsessed with duality and flips a coin to determine whether or not he will kill his enemies. Two-Face is one of Batman's worst enemies, but when the villain Hush gave him plastic surgery, he switched back to the side of law and order and betrayed Hush, helping Batman and Jim Gordon defeat the villain. Batman's friend was back. He trained Harvey to become a vigilante and left him in charge of protecting Gotham while he was away during the Lost Year arc. Unfortunately, when Batman returned, he came across a series of killings that were designed to make it appear that Harvey had returned to villainy. Batman confronted Harvey, who was so angered at Batman's distrust that his Two-Face persona re-emerged and convinced Dent to re-scar his face and return to a life of crime. Number 4. Hunter Zolomon, the Reverse Flash. When Barry Allen was seemingly killed, Wally West became the new Scarlet Speedster. One of his most important allies was an FBI profiler named Hunter Zolomon. Hunter helped Flash understand his enemies and predict their actions so that Flash would be able to capture them easier. After being left in a wheelchair by Gorilla Grodd, Hunter begged Wally to use the cosmic treadmill to go back in time to prevent his injury. Knowing the horrible unintended consequences time travel can have, Wally refused. Zolomon tried to use the treadmill himself, but the resulting explosion gave him the ability to slow down time, giving himself the appearance of super speed. Deciding that Wally could never live up to the legacy of Barry Allen, Zolomon became Wally's Reverse Flash and set about trying to ruin Wally's life, thinking that the tragedy would make him into a better hero. He caused Wally's wife to have a miscarriage and tried to kill Captain Cold because he felt that the villain was wasting Flash's time. The Reverse Flash is a villain because he cares. He genuinely believes that he is making the world a better place by forcing character development onto Wally. With enough therapy, maybe Flash could convince him that he would be serving him better as an ally than as a villain and could reverse his evil ways. Number 3. Nuke. Frank Simpson was an ordinary soldier in the Vietnam War who underwent experimentation by the government in a rather clumsy attempt to recreate the super soldier program that gave birth to Captain America. He has cybernetic enhancements and takes different colored red, white, and blue pills to cause his body to produce additional adrenaline to make him even more dangerous. Nuke thinks he's still in the Vietnam War, and the US tends to just go with his delusions and drop him off wherever they need a lot of people killed in Black Ops operations. Nuke is vicious and dangerous, but most of this is the result of the trauma he suffered in the war. He has shown that he wants to serve his country and keep it safe, but rather than getting him the help he needs and showing him that he no longer needs to go on killing sprees to be a hero, the government indulges his psychosis in order to further their own agenda. In Daredevil Born born again, this came to a tragic end when he was set loose in Hell's Kitchen in an attempt by the Kingpin to drive Daredevil out of hiding. Captain America learned about Nuke and tried to subdue him after he had escaped from custody, but in order to cover their tracks, the US military had Nuke killed before Cap could try and help him. Number 2. The Joker. Batman's arch-enemy the Joker has caused far too much pain and suffering to ever really be redeemed. He paralyzed Barbara Gordon, he killed Jason Todd, he murdered Jim Gordon's wife as well as countless others in his insane obsession with the Batman. However, one version of the character actually did try to redeem himself. In the White Knight universe, the Joker actually became sane and decided to try and save the city, not as a vigilante, but as a politician. Once released from Arkham, Jack Napier sued the GCPD for police brutality and declared war on Gotham's 1%, who were taking advantage of Gotham's crime in order to line their own pockets. He ran for city council and led peaceful protest marches while submitting the other supervillains to mind control in order to further his goals. Although he can never really make up for the harm he has caused, this version of the Joker shows that when properly channeled, his genius intellect can be used to make Gotham a better place. Number 1. Dr. Doom. Longtime rival of the Fantastic Four, Victor Von Doom is the definition of a multi-potentialite. He is the supreme leader of his home country of Latveria, he is an extremely powerful sorcerer, and he is a genius scientist and inventor. His goal is to conquer the Earth so that he can bring order to humanity, and he is willing to go to truly brutal lengths to achieve it. Honestly, this slot could have been filled by several evil scientist characters such as Norman Osborn, the Leader, or Dr. Sivana, because any of them could use their impressive minds to cure diseases or save the Earth from criminals. But Dr. Doom takes this spot because of his nearly unlimited potential to make the Earth a better place. It's a shame that his massive ego and warped sense of right and wrong has led him to believe that the best way to do this is through conquest, as his abilities as a scientist, sorcerer, and inventor could be even more effective at saving the world than those of his ultimate rival, Reed Richards.